developers only, but actually it targets also decision makers or power users willing to understand how and when Microsoft Teams is extensible. So we will not dig into the code, we will not do a deep dive on code, but we will focus on the functionalities and the capabilities from an extensibility point of view. And first of all, let's talk about Teamstab, which is for sure one of the most famous and most useful extensibility points of Microsoft Teams. Well, with the Teamstab, we can embed in the UI of the Teams client, whether it is the web client, the desktop client, or any of the mobile clients, we can embed custom content coming from external sources, which can be external web servers. And we use a kind of an iframe to provide the content of those external web resources inside the wireframe of the Microsoft Teams client. When we create Teamstabs, we can create two different flavors of Teamstabs. We have the so-called configurable tabs, and those are the tabs which can be associated to a channel or to a chat. They can be configured, as the name implies, and they are associated typically with a team channel in which we can store the setting of the tab. And in fact, they are called configurable because when we configure them, they store their settings in the team backing the instance of the tab. Then we have the personal tabs. Those are the tabs that you can use whenever we want to provide a custom solution to the user, which is not related to a specific team, but it is available through the team client UI. And those kind of tabs are accessible to the end user using the left command bar in the UI of Microsoft Teams. And I will show you an example shortly. Those tabs are called personal or static because usually they are not configurable unless you provide a custom technique to configure them, and they are just provided to the end users to give them some kind of personal functionalities or applications which are hosted inside the UI of the Teams client, but which are not related to a specific team instance. So just to give you an idea, playing around the UI of Microsoft Teams, this is the desktop client of Teams, and the channel or configurable tabs are those that are available in the top area of the screen whenever you are in a channel or in a chat. You simply click on the plus button and you can add them to the channel or chat in which you are. The static tabs or personal apps are those available in the left command bar and can be pinned in the left command bar and made available to the users. You can also configure at tenant level policies, app policies, to pin a set of personal apps for all of the users in the tenant so that they will become available by default to any user in your tenant. Just to give you an idea, let me switch to the demo environment and let me show you a few Teamstabs explaining you what is possible, what you can do when you create a team tab in Microsoft Teams. So first of all, I will go to a demo tenant that I have where I already deployed some custom team tabs. This custom team tab is has been built using the SharePoint framework generator, and it is a technique which relies on reusing a SharePoint framework web part as a tab in Teams. This is just an example to give you the idea that within a custom tab that you develop, you can access a bunch of information about the context in which the tab is running. So for example, here we can see that through the context of the tab that is running inside Teams, we can get access to information like the ID of the group and of the team in which we are running. We can see who the user is. We can see what the channel is, and a lot of information which are really useful whenever we want to use tools like, for example, the Microsoft Graph to access the target resources, or any other API which relies on the context in which we are. And just to give an idea of the powerful capability that you can realize when you create a custom team tab for Teams, this is a really simple solution through which I can create a meeting in the calendar of a channel, of a team in which I am. So for example, here I am in this sample team. I will show that we have, let me open another tab with another session of Teams so that I can show you the calendar that I have here. And what we can do, you can see in my calendar, I don't have any meeting, but I can just use a custom tab to create a new meeting, like, for example, this one, M365 collaboration conference virtual. I will create a meeting now from 1 a.m. because now it's almost midnight, actually a little bit after midnight, so 0100 to 2 a.m. In my time zone at least, and I will create a meeting in my target calendar, and you can see that soon it will show up in my calendar, or I can even show you the whole week. Oops, sorry about that. Go back. Here we have the meeting that I just created using the web part. So you can easily use Microsoft Graph under the cover, and you can create solutions which can leverage the graph potentials in a custom team tab. You can provide a configurable interface, so you can easily provide a tab which can be configurable by the end user using a UI which is really well integrated with the Microsoft 365 user experience. So for example, I can use a people picker control, and I can search for people in my organization. I can use a date picker control. I can do a search on the taxonomy that I have, for example, in SharePoint Online, and I can update fields. So I can do quite a lot of interesting stuff simply using a tab as a container for a custom developed solution, which can be built using a SharePoint framework or using any other web-based platform or any toolkit, like, for example, the Microsoft Teams toolkit provided by Microsoft, or the Yo Teams generated provided by the PMP community project. At the same time, you can play with static tabs. So I will switch to another tenant and show you that kind of experience. Here I am in another instance of Team connected to another tenant, and I can, for example, start a static or personal app here, and here we will see we have a solution based on multiple tabs, which are just hosting different web parts that I have in SharePoint framework again, and I can provide a quite nice experience to my users and provide an application hosted inside the wireframe of the Microsoft Teams client, but providing my custom functionalities built on top of, in this scenario, SharePoint framework or any other technology that you like. So this is just to give an idea of what you can do when we talk about Teamstabs from a developer point of view. But Teamstabs are just one part of the story. We can also create teams both when we talk about extending Microsoft Teams. And while a team both is something which is really useful when we want to extend Teams providing a conversational interface to users. So we can use team both in channels and chat, and we can use a team bot to receive messages from a user, to process those messages or those sentences, and to provide back to the user a response, which could be just a simple text or eventually an adaptive card with some interactive content. If you want, in the back end of a bot, you can, for example, register with an application-only token access to Microsoft Graph, and as such, you can also access Teams or all of the workloads available in Microsoft 365. And if you like, with a little bit of effort, you can also make it possible for a team bot in the backend to work in the name of the currently connected user, so that you can provide dedicated functionalities to the user interacted with a bot in a chat, just to give you an idea and just to make an example. When we talk about a bot, again, in the UI of Teams, for example, a bot can be used in a chat, in a one-to-one chat between a user and the bot. And in order to do that, again, you need to create a solution with whatever technology you like, as long as you will make available a kind of a web service endpoint, which will have to be registered in Azure as a bot channel connected to Microsoft Teams. And again, just to give you an example of an actual bot, I created a bot using the Yo Teams generator, for example, here. And in my tenant, I can go to the chat and I can show you how I can interact with this bot. Of course, I can write some messages to chat with my target bot. I can say hello to the bot, and I will get back a reply from the bot. Most likely now the Azure App Service is not running because it was on sleep, and it will take a while to wake it up. But in a matter of few seconds, we will see a reply coming back from the bot. The interesting part of the story is that when you interact with a bot, as I told you, you can get back a response, which is just simple text. Here we are now. The bot is up and running. You can send a message. Oops. Help me, please, and the bot will process the message and give me back a response. But as I told you, you can also get back from a bot a rich content like an adaptive card. So, for example, if I will ask to the bot, who is the most beautiful man in the world? Of course, the reply will be that I am the most beautiful man in the world. Who else? But of course, I'm just kidding. But as you can see, I can get back a rich content. This is a card in an adaptive card, which will provide rich content to the user. You can see we can have a picture. We can have content divided into multiple columns. I can have actions. So, for example, I can click on any of these buttons, and I can go to my Twitter profile. I can go to my YouTube channel, and I can use this interface to provide an interactive response to the user. Just to give you an idea, this card could be a card with a link which will show, for example, a dialog window to the user to collect some additional information, which might be useful for starting or running a backend process, which will be managed by the bot interacting with my user. So it is really a powerful scenario and a powerful extensibility point from a Teams extensibility point of view. Moreover, we can create messaging extensions. Well, a messaging extension is an extension of Teams that you can use to trigger custom actions in the UI of Teams. Again, the desktop, the web, or the mobile one. When you create a messaging extension, you can activate, as an end user, you can activate a messaging extension either using the @mention syntax. So you are composing a message, for example, you use the @mention and you use the name of the messaging extension. This will activate your extension, and through the extension, the user will be able to, for example, build a better content for the message that he or she is composing. A messaging extension can also be activated in the command bar in the top area of the Microsoft Teams client, simply using again the @mention syntax, and can be used to execute a command or to search for some specific content, which can rely on any kind of backend service or infrastructure. So, for example, if you have your ERP system and you want to make it possible for users to search the list of products, or you have a CRM solution and you want to search for the list of customers or prospects, well, you can create a messaging extension and the user will be able to search for those items, get back a result, and eventually include one specific item in a message that they are composing. The messaging extensions can also be activated using the 3 dots near the message composition box, or in the more actions that we have when we provide a feedback to a message. Last but not least, a messaging extension can be activated also when a user pastes a URL in a message composition box. So imagine a user is composing a new message, copies a URL from somewhere and pastes the URL inside the message composition area. Well, you can intercept the URL, you can define a filter in your messages extension based on the domain of the URL that the user is pasting. And if the URL of the user will match your filter, you can trigger a messaging extension to convert the actual URL into, for example, a card with much more information about the content pasted by the user. So just to give you an idea again, in the UI, a messaging extension can be used and invoked in the command bar in the top area, right here, as you see, can be activated when composing a message, can be activated from the three dots just below the composition area, or when you provide feedback, clicking on these three dots and selecting more actions. And of course, as I told you, also by copying and pasting a URL in the message composition area, so in this area of the screen. Before, let me show you a real actual messaging extension that I built. So let me go to Teams in a channel, in a demo channel that I have, and here I can create a new message. So I want to use the message composition box. Well, in this area, you can see I have a bunch of actions available. One is a custom one. You see, this is the logo of my company, and by clicking on this logo, I can activate a dialog window. This dialog window, from a Teams extensibility point of view, is called task module. And a task module is nothing more than a modal dialog that you can render in the UI of the Teams client. Inside the task module, you can render either a HTML content and a React component, for example, hosted in a client-side-based solution, or an adaptive card that you can render inside the content of the task module. Here, for example, I can select one of the videos that I have in my YouTube channel, and by clicking on the Insert button, you will see that you can insert the content, the rich content related to the video that I selected inside the message that I'm composing. This one is again a card that I created on the fly based on the user selection, and I can post this message in the channel, and this message will be also provide an action which will open the actual video content on YouTube for this video. So this is just to give you an idea of what you can do with the messaging extension, which can also be activated using the command bar, as I told you. So I can go here, and using the @mention, I can search for my messaging extension. I do that, I activate again my dialog window from this UI. So either in the compose message box or from the command bar, I can activate my extension. And if it is a search messaging extension, I can search for something and I will see a list of results, which will have to be provided by my extension, of course, and which will be then available to the user so that the user will be able to select one item and again include that item in the content of a message that the user is composing, just to give you an idea or just to explain you a potential use case of this functionality. And as I said, we can also use the messaging extension to extend this area or to manage a link pasted into the content of a message composition area. So the messaging extension, in my opinion, are one of the most powerful extensibility points of Microsoft Teams, because you can interact with the user while the user is composing messages or reading messages inside the UI of Microsoft Teams. What else? Well, from an extensibility point of view, we can also extend Microsoft Teams creating connectors and webhooks. Well, webhooks are available in two different flavors. We have the incoming and the outgoing webhooks. The incoming webhooks are those webhooks that allow an external solution to send messages to Microsoft Teams. An outgoing webhook is whenever you have a Microsoft team sending messages to an external system that we create. So the point of view is from Teams. Incoming, we send something inside of Teams. Outgoing, we send something outside of Teams. When we create incoming webhooks, those webhooks are configurable for specific target channels. When we create outgoing webhooks, the outgoing webhooks are configured at team scope level. So when you create an outgoing webhook, it will be created for the whole team in which you create it. Once you have defined an incoming webhook, an external system can send a JSON message to Teams, and the JSON message can be just a simple text-based message, or can be a rich text message, again, based on an adaptive card, for example, with rich content, images, and stuff like that. If you want to use incoming webhooks, you need to keep into account that they target channel only and they do not target a chat. If you want to do stuff in a chat, you will have to rely on the outgoing webhooks or to the Teams bot extensibility model. When you create an outgoing webhook, you trigger the webhook using the @mention, almost like a messaging extension. But when you say @mention and you provide the name of the outgoing webhook, the message will be sent straight to the external system, while when you use a messaging extension or a bot, there is the Microsoft Azure bot infrastructure in between. So it's a more simplified architectural solution when you talk about outgoing webhooks compared with bot and messaging extensions. When you get a message in an outgoing webhook, you can reply back to the channel or to the chat that raised the message to you, simply again providing a text message or a JSON message, which can be a card. And if you want, if you need to share the same incoming webhook across multiple teams or across all of the tenants in Microsoft 365, you can create the so-called connectors, which were also known as the Office 365 connectors in the past, and now are the Microsoft 365 connectors, generally speaking. A connector is nothing more than an incoming webhook, which is available to multiple channels, and eventually, if you publish it on the Office Store, also to multiple tenants, so you make it available to anybody having a Microsoft 365 tenant. When you want to create a connector, you have to register the connector through a specific registration portal provided by Microsoft, and you will have to adhere to some requirements and some required fields that you will need to fill out in order to register your connector. But aside from that, from a functional point of view, it will be almost like an incoming webhook, just more generic and potentially targeting multiple channels or even any tenant in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And you can easily redistribute the connectors, while an incoming webhook has to be registered in every single target channel where you want to have it. So again, let me show you in action the webhooks and the connectors to give you the idea of what they are and how they work. Of course, now in this slide deck, I cannot show you where they fit in the UI because we need to see them in action in the Microsoft Teams UI. So, for example, let's say that again in this team channel, I want to target an external webhook. Well, I can simply use the @mention to target an outgoing webhook, and I can target my webhook simply provided the name. I have a demo outgoing webhook registered in my system, and I can trigger the webhook just providing a message. Hello, how are you? The message will be sent to an external system, which will reply back. Right now, the external system is an Azure function, and if we look in this team, we can go to Manage Team, we can go to Apps, and create an outgoing webhook, and we can create a new outgoing webhook. We will simply need to provide a name, the URL of a callback, a description, and a logo, a picture for the webhook. I already have an outgoing webhook configured, so I can click on this one and I can show you that this is just something hosted on Azure, and specifically it is an Azure function which will reply back to my request with a simple message. As I said, the reply can be based on the context, of course, and can be a card, an adaptive card, which we can use to provide a rich response to the user. If we talk about incoming webhooks, on the contrary, an incoming webhook can be configured at channel level. So you click on the three dots of a channel, you go to connectors. You can add a new connector called incoming webhook, or you can configure any of the already pre-configured incoming webhooks. For example, in my scenario, I already have an incoming webhook configured. So if I click on the configured link right here, I can expand the list of configured items, and I can see that I already have an incoming webhook configured. I see a specific URL that I can use to send a message to this webhook. And just for the sake of simplicity, let me use Fiddler to send a message to this channel to show you the incoming webhook in action. So here I have Fiddler. I can target the URL of my incoming webhook. I need to provide a request through a post message with a content type of type application JSON, and I can provide the JSON content of my incoming webhook. By doing that, I will get a message inside my channel, my target channel. What is interesting is that, again, I can use rich content, like, for example, this one, which will include a message with an attachment, which will be an adaptive card. Inside this adaptive card, I have, for example, a poll, which I can send to the users. But I can also do more. I can send an adaptive card, which will include binary content, like a picture, and which will include actions for the user. So let me send this one to the target channel. And as you can see, we can send a card with text, with additional information like fact set, and we can provide an action, which will be a link, which will bring the user, for example, to a target solution, like in this example is a custom task module. Of course, in order to use this task module, I need to run it. So sorry about that. I forgot to start the project in my environment. So let me do that right now. And I will show you the result. So seconds to start the solution. And let me refresh the page as soon as the solution will be running. And now I can click on the action that I got through the incoming webhook. Not yet ready, still loading. So let's wait a few more seconds. Sorry about that. And hopefully not yet. Oh, long wait today. Come on. Okay, and now it is working. So I can get an adaptive card as an input message coming from an incoming webhook. And for example, if I have an action in this card, which is an open URL action, I can use the action to open a dialog in Microsoft Teams. This is a task module, which I open using a deep link, a so-called deep link. What is happening under the cover is that in this adaptive card, I provide the content that you see, so the text and a couple of columns with the information about the user, including the picture and the description of the user. And then in the action section, we provide an action open URL and the link to a task module, which will open a dialog window to play a video selected by the incoming webhook in the response sent to the target channel. So basically, we provide what is called a deep link, which will trigger the opening of a custom modal dialog in the UI of Microsoft Teams, which is, again, something really powerful when you want to extend the UI and provide custom functionalities to the end users. Moreover, we can use Microsoft Graph to interact with Teams. And let me say that Microsoft Graph is the only way to programmatically interact with Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft Graph is the API for Microsoft 365 and not only for Microsoft 365. Through Graph, we can do a lot of stuff targeting Teams, and specifically we can create and manage Teams channels and tabs. We can even manage messages. We can even read messages written in a channel. We can play with calendars, with apps, and app catalog. So plenty of options that we can leverage to interact with Microsoft Teams through Microsoft Graph. In order to do that, what we need to do is to have an application registered in Azure Active Directory. The application will need to have proper permissions to access Microsoft Teams. And just to make it even more clear, these permissions can be permissions to consume Microsoft Teams in the name of the currently connected users. And if that is the case, you will need to request a delegated access token to access Microsoft Graph and Microsoft Teams through Microsoft Graph. Or if you want, you can access Microsoft Teams with an application-only access token, meaning that you will use an application identity or a service account, we can call it this way, which will be associated with an application that you will register in Azure Active Directory. And so you will consume Microsoft Teams just with the identity of an application without any specific user identity. Or Microsoft recently introduced the capability to consume Microsoft Teams through Graph, also using the so-called resource-specific consent authorization model, which allows a team owner to consent an external application to access the team that he owns or she owns, and that can be used to allow an application to access just a specific team and not every team in the tenant or not all of the team available to a specific user, but just with an application only model, which is targeting just a specific team or a specific set of teams where the team owners allow the application to have access to their content, which is a really powerful capability that we have right now still in preview, but really, really powerful and interesting. In order to play with the Microsoft Graph right now, I will simply use the Graph Explorer that we have if we go to graphmicrosoft.com. And I just want to give you an idea of what you can do with Microsoft Graph. So here in the API reference, you can see that in the Teamwork section, we have plenty of options to use and to interact with Microsoft Teams within Microsoft Graph. We can create teams, we can manage members, we can manage the channels, we can manage the tabs, the chat, and so on and so forth. But using the Graph Explorer, we can do something like that. We can, for example, connect to our target tenant. In my team client, I have some teams available, like, for example, this one, Teams Provisioning. I can search for the groups because we know and we need to know that under the cover of every team in Microsoft Teams, there is a group, a Microsoft 365 group. So I can search for the groups. Groups. I can search for a specific group using the Open Data Protocol as a developer. So I can say $filter, and I can say, give me just the group with display name equal, I need to URL encode the syntax, equal to, and I can provide a value, which will be, for example, Teams Provisioning, just for the sake of making an example, Teams space Provisioning. I can search for this specific group, and I can get the ID of the group. By doing that, I can then access the collection of teams, providing the ID of the team that I want to target. For that team, I can get access to the channels, for example. And for the channels, I can get the ID of the general channel so that I can get the channel object. For that channel, I can get access to the tabs and so on and so forth. So as you can see, using Microsoft Graph and using the hierarchical model of Microsoft Graph, I can easily access all of the objects that I have in Microsoft Teams, as long as I have proper permissions to do that, of course. And I can not only read, but also write and manage data. So I can make a post and create a new item. I can make a put and update a new item. Just to give you an idea, I can, for example, create a new team. If I go to Teamwork again, under the team section, I can create a team making a post request using Microsoft Graph to the collection of teams and providing as the content a JSON description of the team that I want to create. So I can say here in the Graph Explorer, make a post to the collection of teams. In the body, I want to create a new team, which will be M365 Conference. This will be the name, and this will be the description, M365 Conference. Okay. I can create a team based on the standard out of the box and from scratch empty template, or I can use a template already defined in my tenant. We will come to this topic a little bit later in this session. But when I do that, run query, I can make a request to create a new team, accepted 202. If I go back here, I can see that I have my new team created in my team client. So I can programmatically create, manage, read, and do all the stuff that I need targeting Microsoft Teams using Microsoft Graph, which is again really powerful. We can extend the UI of Teams using the adaptive card, as you saw. The adaptive card can be the content of almost any message that we send to Teams, as well as we can use the adaptive card to build the content of the pop-up dialogues that we have in Microsoft Teams. So, for example, when we create a task module, the content of a task module can be HTML or can be an adaptive card. And the adaptive card can also be used to collect information from the user. So not only to provide read-only information, but also to collect content and information from the user. And it becomes really powerful because you can create user interfaces based on the standard UI of Microsoft 365 with a very low effort. You just need to define a JSON file which will declare the components and the items that you want to have in the adaptive card. And you don't need to take care of responsiveness or anything else. You simply need to provide the adaptive card as the content, the actual content of your UI, and everything else will be managed by the engine that renders the adaptive cards in Microsoft 365. As I said, you can use an adaptive card as the content of a task module, or generally speaking, you can use a task module as a pop-up dialog whenever you want to provide rich content to the users within the user experience of the Microsoft Teams client. And you can use a task module to show or to collect, to show content or to collect information from the user. Moreover, when you create a Teams-based solution, you can also create templates. In Microsoft Teams, Microsoft recently introduced the capability to reuse the definition of a team as a template whenever you want to create a new team. When you use a team template, you can define some general settings of a team. You can define the channels, just the public ones. The private ones are not yet supported, and the apps that you want to have in the teams that you will create based on the template that you are defining. You can use some out-of-the-box templates provided by Microsoft, or you can create your own templates, which can be created either starting from the out-of-the-box ones provided by Microsoft, or can be a template that you create from your own teams or from scratch. And as I already briefly told you, you can also use Microsoft Graph to create a team based on a specific template. So let me show you what I mean. If I go back to my Teams client, I can go to portal.office.com and I can go to the admin UI of Microsoft Teams. So let me go to the admin UI of 365. And from there, I will go to the Teams admin UI. And here we are. In the Teams section, we have the team templates. Here we have a list of out-of-the-box templates provided by Microsoft. And we have also some custom templates that I created by myself. If you want to create a new team template, you simply click on the Add button, and you can choose if you want to create a fresh new one, starting from scratch. If you want to use an existing team as a template, so you configure a team using the team UI, and then you save it as a template, or starting from an already existing one, which can be one of the out-of-the-box provided by Microsoft, or one of your own templates that you simply want to customize. If you start from scratch, you can provide a name, M365 template, a description. I'm lazy, so I will simply reuse the same content. And then you can define the channels that you want to have, and you can easily add additional channels, another channel, for example, which will be shown by default. And I can add apps. So for example, I want to have the wiki app, or I don't know, the OneNote or whatever else app always available by default in my team. I save it, and in a matter of few minutes, it will not be in few seconds, it will take few minutes, but the template will become available at tenant level, and you will be able to reuse it whenever you want to create a new team. How? Well, you simply go here, the team client, you create a new team, and you will be able, actually it's already here, and you will be able to create a new team based on any of the templates available at tenant level. What is really interesting is that if from a developer point of view, I mean, if you go back to Graph Explorer and you make another request to create another team, let's say, call it 02 because I'm a developer and I don't have a good fantasy. But instead of creating a team based on the standard template, we can replace this value with the ID of any of the templates that we have at tenant level. So for example, if I want to reuse the organize help desk, here we can see this is the template ID of the organize help desk. And I can copy this value and paste it here, and I will be able to create a new team based on the out-of-the-box template. If we go here, we see we have the new one, which will be created based on the template that I choose. So again, something which is really powerful whenever you develop solutions and you want to release solutions to your users or customers, and you want to automate the provisioning of teams. So yet another really interesting extensibility point. Now, we saw quite a lot of extensibility points. We saw that we can create tabs, we can create messaging extensions, bot, task module, we can use adaptive cards, we can create outgoing and incoming webhooks, we can create connectors, and we can play with the Teams templates. From a developer point of view, we need to set up a development environment to being able to create such kind of stuff. What we need to do is, first of all, to create a developer tenant, a Microsoft 365 developer tenant. And here in this slide, you can see the URL where you can go to create a new developer account for Microsoft 365, and you will get a free tenant, which will be available all lifelong, as long as you will keep on using it. If you will stop using it, it will be deprovisioned. But if you will keep on using it, if you will keep on developing on top of it, it will be available for you forever at the very end. So my advice is go here, create your subscription, and create your developer tenant. Then you should install Visual Studio Code. If you plan to run multiple solutions relying on Node.js, my advice is to also use the Node version manager and to install it in your environment to being able to switch between different versions of Node.js in your development environment. I would suggest you to install the SharePoint framework tooling to being able to create Teamstab with SharePoint framework, because Teamstab built with SharePoint framework are really simple and easy to create. You should also install the App Studio in Teams. The App Studio is an app that you have in Microsoft Teams, it's this one, that you can use to edit the manifest of a solution for Teams or to edit custom cards. There is an editor that you can use. You can click on Create New Card. You can start from a different flavor of templates, like, for example, an adaptive card, and then you have an editor, which is quite handy to help you build a card in this UI and with the capability to see what the code is whenever you want to use it in .NET or in Node.js. Then you should install your Teams, because at this point in time, my advice is that your Teams is the right tool for creating extensions for Teams. There is also the Microsoft Teams Toolkit provided by Microsoft, which is quite a young tool that you can consider using, but in my opinion, at this point in time, your Teams is a little bit more powerful. In the future, for sure, the Teams toolkit will grow and will become more robust and more available, and we will most likely switch to that one. But right now, my preference is for your Teams. Then you should install the bot framework if you like to develop bot and you want to use the bot framework in your environment. Or on the other side, you can just rely on what is created with the scaffolding of your Teams, which will create a Node.js based bot, and you don't need to have the bot framework locally installed to play with it. And then you should remember to enable in your Teams tenant the side loading of applications. So you need to go to the Teams admin UI. Here, you go to apps, policies, setup policies, and you go to the global org wide, and you enable the upload custom apps flag. You need this one if you want to be able to do something like that. In a team, you go to the manage team, apps, and you want to upload custom apps from here. Otherwise, you will not be able to do that. Once you've done that, well, create a team in your developer tenant, have fun, develop your solutions, and start building actual solutions on top of Microsoft Teams. Because Microsoft Teams, as I said at the very beginning of this session, is a platform for building solutions and not only a collaboration tool. That said, here you can see just for giving you a recap, there is a list of extensibility points with a mapping with the tools that we have available right now to create Microsoft Teams solutions. As you can see, with SharePoint Framework, we can easily create tabs, whether they are configurable or static tabs. You can, with such kind of an effort, you can create messaging extensions or eventually task modules, but it will not be that easy, let me say, because it's not available out of the box in the scaffolding tool in the Yeoman generator for SharePoint Framework, but you will have to do some tricks to do that. And you cannot create bot or webhooks, whether they are incoming or outgoing. On the contrary, with your Teams, you can create all of these options or all of these extensibility options. And with the Microsoft Teams Toolkit, you can do almost everything as well, except the outgoing webhooks. If you will, you can also install the App Studio, as I told you, and the App Studio works very well with the Microsoft Toolkit, Teams Toolkit, so that you can easily edit and maintain the manifest of your solution with App Studio, and then you can use them in the Microsoft Teams Toolkit. And here you can find a link to see how to use both of them together to build solutions for Microsoft Teams. That said, that was the content I wanted to share in these 50 minutes. We still have, as expected, about 10 minutes for any question if there is. So feel free to use the chat to ask your questions. Let me see if there is already something. Yes. Will you please display the environment slide 1 of 2 or share the presentation slide? Sure, I can go back to the slide, but I will also share the slide deck. So this one, right? So if you have any question or any feedback or complaint, feel free to raise your hand or to use the chat area to interact with me. Okay, there is something in the chat. So, okay, you're welcome. Anything else? I don't see any other question in the chat, and I don't see any raised hand. So can I assume that everything was clear or clear enough at least? Just as a reminder, you can eventually subscribe to my YouTube channel, where I usually on a weekly basis publish content about Teams and SharePoint and graph development. So if you're interested in these topics, there you will find additional content. And there is something, okay, which tools allow to deploy to app source? Usually, when you want to deploy to app source, I don't use a specific tool, but I just follow the process for publishing a custom solution. If I'm not mistaken, you can do something with the Teams toolkit, but I'm not 100% sure. Generally speaking, I usually just follow the procedure described on docmicrosoft.com to publish the application on app source. I don't use any specific tool. Anything else? Welcome. So let's see if there is any other question, or we can wrap up and close here. Of course, I can go back to the thank you slide just to be kind. Okay, I see something else in the chat. So, okay, thank you. So I think we can stop here because there are no more questions. So thank you for attending this session. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know on Twitter if you liked it, and see you next time, hopefully in person. Thank you.